You're listening to the Happiest Lives podcast with Jill Lillard, episode 161.
Welcome to the Happiest Lives podcast, where you'll learn to think better, feel better, and become the woman God says you already are. Here's your host, Jill Lillard.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Happiest Lives podcast. Okay, so last week we started this series called Why You Keep Having the Same Fight. And if you were with me for that episode, hopefully something clicked, because what we were really doing was pulling back the curtain on the cycle underneath the most reoccurring conflict. We're not talking about the topic. We are looking at the pattern, the shape of how it goes every time. I call this the dance. And I know looking at your own moves inside the cycle isn't always comfortable. However, that discomfort is actually a good sign. So today, I want to go one layer deeper, because here's something I've noticed in my coaching work over and over again. People can understand the cycle, they can name it, they can see it, they can have a really thoughtful session and leave feeling like, okay, we've got this. And then they get home and something happens. It doesn't even have to be a big event. And suddenly the conversation is completely sideways and they don't know how they got there. What I want to offer you today is that most of the time, what happened wasn't just a communication breakdown. It was flooding. And until you understand flooding, what it actually is, what it does to your body, and why it makes the simplest conversation feel impossible, then it's really going to be hard to change anything. So let me tell you about Mark and Christy. We're going to go back to the couple we talked about last week. About 3 weeks ago into our work together, they had a genuinely good session. Like, both of them were showing up, using new language, tracking the cycle. It was one of those sessions where you leave feeling hopeful. And then they drove home, and somewhere between the car and the kitchen, there was a comment about the credit card statement, and within about 4 minutes, it had completely fallen apart. Mark was in another room, and Christy was standing in the kitchen, not knowing whether she wanted to cry or throw something. So she texted me the next morning. What happened? We were doing so well. And I said, it sounds like you both got flooded, both of you, and you didn't have a plan for that yet. So here's what flooding actually is. This is when your body perceives a threat. And I want you to hear that word, it perceives, because your nervous system is not always working from accurate information. It mobilizes. Your heart rate goes up, stress hormones come in, your muscles tighten, your breathing changes. And your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain doing all the nuanced thinking, the empathy, the long-term reasoning, the ability to actually hear what someone is saying, that goes offline. So your brain stem takes over. And your brain stem is very good at keeping you alive, but it's not interested in having a productive conversation. So the Gottmans found that once the heart rate climbs up above 100 beats per minute during conflict, people are genuinely not capable of the conversation they're trying to have. You can't listen well. You can't take in new information. You can't extend the benefit of the doubt or hold any complexity at all. You're in survival mode, and survival mode has one job. Now, here's where I want to slow down a little, because flooding doesn't look like one thing. There are actually 4 different responses, and if you only recognize one of them, you're going to miss what's happening in yourself and in the people you love. So fight is the one we usually think of. Louder, sharper, defending, pressing, not backing down. Flight, on the other hand, is wanting out. And that's not always physically leaving. It can look like changing the subject, or making a joke that deflects, or suddenly finding something that you need to do in another room. Freeze is when you're still sitting there, but nothing is landing. Your mind goes blank. You feel stuck. The lights are on, but you are genuinely not home. And then there's shutdown, or stonewalling, which I want to stay with that for a minute, because this is the one that those quiet marriages live inside of and often don't recognize as flooding at all. So shutdown looks calm. It looks like 2 people who don't fight, who handle things maturely, and who never raise their voices. But what's actually happen is that one or both of them has crossed the flooding threshold so many times without real repair that their nervous system just reorganized around staying flooded. The shutdown became the baseline. As I said last week, just because you guys are quiet and polite with one another, it doesn't mean you have a healthy relationship. Sometimes this just means the alarm went underground. If you're in a marriage that feels more like two people managing distance than two people actually in it together, that's really worth paying attention to. So Christy floods into fight. When she gets scared she's not being heard, scared that distance is growing, she pursues. Words become faster. She re-explains. She asks the same thing different ways. From the outside, it can look like she's escalating. From inside her body, she's terrified and she's trying every door she can find to make contact. Now, Mark floods into shutdown. When he gets scared he's failing, scared nothing is ever going to be good enough, he gets really quiet. He slows down. He eventually leaves. And from the outside, it looks like he doesn't care. But from inside, leaving is the only thing standing between him and saying something he can't walk back. Both of them are flooded. And when two flooded people try to have a hard conversation, they're not actually talking to each other. They're talking to their nervous system's version of each other. And that version is not generous and it is not accurate. So what do you do? Well, this is where I want to give you what I call the flood plan. And I'll be honest with you, the concept is pretty simple, but the execution is a little bit more tricky. It's going to take some practice, especially the first part, which is learning to recognize flooding in yourself before it's already in motion. A lot of us were taught directly or just by example to push through, to manage it, to keep going. So we've gotten really good at overriding the signal until we're miles past it. And then we wonder why we said something we didn't mean. So the first step is to just recognize it. And that means learning your flooding signature, the physical sensations that show up in your body before things get loud. For some people, it's the throat, a tightening, words starting to stack up. For some, it's the chest. Some people start talking faster. Some go flat. Christy told me her signature is that she starts finishing Mark's sentences, not because she knows what he's going to say, but because her body is already 3 steps ahead trying to manage the scary part before it arrives. You have a signature too. You might not know it yet, but learning it is genuinely one of the most useful things you can do. And this is where the feel method comes in, which some of you have heard me talk about this before. The first step is to find the emotion. Just locate it. Where is it? What does it feel like in your body? And the second step is experience it, which means you stay with it instead of immediately trying to think your way out of it or manage it away. Just let yourself be in your body long enough to know what's actually there. Now, so many of us are so good at disconnecting from our body, and there are so many buffers available, whether it's scrolling on our cell phone, eating a snack, or distracting ourselves with television. Those 2 steps together, find it and experience it, are your early warning system. The more fluent you get at it, the sooner you catch the flood before it's running everything. We're going to talk about the rest of the feel method next week, because that's where it gets really interesting. But for today, those first 2 steps are your foundation. So the second step in the flood plan is to give a signal. And this is important. You want to agree on this before you need it, when things are calm, not in the middle of an argument. This might be a word, a phrase, a hand gesture, whatever is simple enough to produce when your brain is already starting to shut down. Because when you're flooded, you do not have a lot of bandwidth. The signal needs to be something you can do practically on autopilot. And when it's given by either of you, you both agree to honor it. No pushing through. No, we're going to finish this right now. You honor it because you both understand what's actually happening physiologically when flooding hits. The third thing is you actually separate different rooms if you can, not within earshot of each other, because proximity when you're flooded keeps your nervous system activated. You're still tracking them. You're braced. You need enough physical space that your body can start to believe the threat isn't immediate. And this is the deal, that you're coming back. The person who called the timeout is the one responsible for reinitiating. That's a built-in protection against this becoming stonewalling, because if there's a history of someone calling a pause and never returning, the other person stops trusting the pause and then it stops working. So the person who called it comes back, and the window is somewhere between 30 minutes and 24 hours. Not 3 days, not until it's so buried that you just pretend it didn't happen. Now, an exception is if you are working with a therapist, then you can maybe plan to go back to the session and talk about it there if you feel like you haven't developed the skills yet to have a conversation. So the fourth piece is to actually regulate. And I want to be really clear about what this is not. It is not replaying the argument in your head. That is marinating. Your nervous system cannot tell the difference between a real threat and a vivid mental replay of one. So if you're walking around the block, running the fight you just had on loop, you're not calming down. You're staying flooded. Actual regulation is physical. So it might involve movement, long, slow exhales, because the exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system in a way the inhale doesn't. Maybe it's doing something with your hands. Music, prayer, whatever brings your body back to a sense of safety. And this is where the experience step of feel does its real work. You experience the emotion instead of fighting it or feeding it. You breathe and slow down and let your body settle. Emotions that get actually experienced move through. We call that the let go. That's the L part of the feel method. That's just how it works. When I walk someone through experiencing an emotion, I usually teach them to set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes where they can sit there and they're just going to stay in their body. They're going to notice what they're experiencing as though they want to be able to describe that to a doctor. They're focusing on the physical sensations and finding the words to describe it without getting caught up in the thoughts that are offering themselves. Now, they don't have to fight away the thoughts. When you do that, it usually backfires. If thoughts are coming up, you notice them, you allow them to be there, float away like clouds, and bring your attention back to your body. So before we move on, I think this is where a lot of people get stuck. Taking a pause sounds good in theory, but if you have a history of one person leaving and never coming back to the conversation, or if you use distance as a way to manage conflict for a long time, the pause can start to feel like just another version of the same thing, and your partner isn't wrong to feel that way. So that's why the commitment to return matters so much. It's what separates a pause from stonewalling. It's what makes the space safe instead of scary. And honestly, this is where I think the faith piece is real. It's what love actually requires. 1 Corinthians 13 says love is patient. And I think one of the things that means practically is that love waits until it can actually see the other person. Not the threat, not the symbol of everything that's gone wrong, the actual person. When you're flooded, it just collapses the other person into a symbol. So Mark becomes the man who checks out, and Christy becomes the woman who's never satisfied. Neither of those is the whole person. But a flooded nervous system can't hold the whole person. So the pause, the real one where you regulate and when you return, is how you get them back. Okay, so your assignment before we close. This week, I want you to map your flooding signature. Do this somewhere quiet, on a walk, in your journal, wherever you have a little space to think. Go back to a recent conversation that went south and ask yourself, when did I first feel it? What was the sensation before things got loud? What did I do with it? Did I push forward? Did I go quiet? Did I freeze? Did I find somewhere else to be? And then think about your signal. What word or gesture would actually work for you in a flooded moment? If your husband is open to it, This is a really good conversation to have on a calm day. Agree on the signal together. Talk through what the flood plan looks like for you specifically before you need it. Having thought it through once means you're not starting from scratch when your brain is already shutting down. Next week, we're going to talk about the story you've been telling yourself, because once you've found the emotion and let your body settle, there's another layer. And it's the one that often determines whether you walk back into the conversation with your heart open or your defenses already up. We're going to work through the explain step of the feel method and use the heart scan to help you understand where the feeling is actually coming from, what meaning you've been making, what story has been running underneath the conflict. That awareness is going to do two things. It's going to help you validate yourself right there in the moment, and it's going to help you step back into a conversation in a completely different way. So you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. If you want to take this work and apply it, go to myhappyvault.com. That's where I share free resources and ways to stay connected. I'll talk to you next time.